Hello, my friends. Tonight I'm here with you again, just like the times before. Maybe you're sitting beside a cup of hot tea or curled up in your familiar sofa. Let me tell you a story. It's a letter from a woman in her 50s. She writes, not to apologize, not to change the past, but simply to touch the scar in her heart. When she was 22, her parents said, "You have to think of the family." A summer noon, her dress swaying lightly in the doorway, the scent of jasmine and fresh laundry soap in the air. Somewhere across town, a man was waiting, with gentle eyes and ink-stained fingers. She chose the one who fit the family picture. A wedding ring that glimmered, a smile forced into the photograph. Polite applause, distant and thin, like rain tapping on glass. And then, a plane took him out of her sight, forever. Now, in a small kitchen, the fridge hums softly, the clock ticks steadily. Outside, the smell of wet leaves drifts in through the window. She sits beneath a warm lamp, her hand holding the pen. She writes, not to turn back time, but to say, "I saw you, I loved you, but I was afraid." If tonight, you too carry a feeling you've never spoken out loud, then stay here with me. Take a deep breath, let the room slow down. We will open this letter, one word at a time. I'm sitting here tonight, in my small kitchen. The lamp throws a warm circle on the table, and my hand rests on the first clean page. Outside, the rain is only a whisper, soft against the window, like fingers brushing glass. The air carries the smell of wet leaves, mixed with the faint bitterness of coffee cooling beside me. It's strange how a quiet night can pull the past into the room, like someone opening a door you forgot was still there. And suddenly, I see it again. The street where we met, sunlight spilling across uneven pavement, a breeze carrying the scent of bread from the bakery down the corner. You were leaning against your bicycle, one hand shading your eyes, smiling as if you'd been waiting all morning. I didn't know it then, but that smile would follow me for years, even through the life I chose without you. I remember the first words you spoke to me. Not grand, not rehearsed, just a simple, "You dropped this," as you held out the small blue scarf I'd been wearing. The scarf still smelled of jasmine from my mother's garden, and of the soap we used to wash clothes by hand. Your fingers brushed mine, light, but enough to send a warmth through me that stayed long after you'd stepped back. There was a market nearby that day. I can still hear the soft clatter of fruit in wooden crates, vendors calling out prices, the flutter of pigeons startled by a child's laughter. And in the middle of all that noise, it felt like you and I were in our own quiet place. It's only now, decades later, that I realize how rare that feeling was, how easily it could have been the beginning of everything, if only I had been braver. That afternoon, you walked with me part of the way home. The sun was slipping low, and the shadows from the tamarind trees stretched long across the road. You didn't talk much, just asked small questions about my day, my classes, the book I was carrying. I remember the faint smell of ink on your shirt sleeve, and the soft creak of your bicycle as it rolled beside us. When we reached the bend near my house, you stopped. We stood there for a moment, not wanting to say goodbye, but not knowing how to linger either. You lifted your hand, a small wave, and then rode away slowly, the bell on your bike ringing once, clear and bright in the evening air. That sound stayed with me for years. I can still hear it, like a promise I never held on to. After that day, I began noticing you everywhere. In the morning crowd at the tea shop, by the post office, holding a stack of envelopes, sometimes on the bridge, looking out over the river as if you were searching for something only you could see. The river smelled faintly of mud and rain-soaked grass, its surface catching shards of sunlight between drifting leaves. You always stood with your hands in your pockets, your shirt sleeves rolled, and that quiet half-smile as if the world could not hurry you. I found myself walking slower when I thought you might be near, choosing the longer route to market, lingering by the bakery just to see if you would pass. Back then, I told myself it was nothing, just a passing fondness. But even now, I know it was the start of something far deeper. There was a morning, the sky pale and still after a night of rain. I saw you again, standing outside the bookstore. The glass windows held the faint smell of paper and dust, and inside, the slow rustle of pages turning. You were holding a thin notebook, your thumb tracing the spine as if memorizing it. I hesitated before stepping closer. We talked about books, and your voice had that steady calm, like the low hum of a ceiling fan on a quiet afternoon. I left with a book I didn't need, and the memory of your smile as you handed it to me, as if you'd given me something more than paper and ink. After that, the days seemed to arrange themselves around you. I'd catch glimpses in the market, your sleeves rolled, carrying a small bag of fruit. The smell of ripe mango drifted between us, mixing with the sound of vendors calling over the crowd. You would nod, just enough to let me know you'd seen me, before disappearing into the movement of the street. Sometimes, I wondered if you timed your errands to cross paths with me, or if the town was simply too small for us to avoid each other. Either way, each meeting felt like a small stitch, pulling our days a little closer together. One evening, I saw you on the bridge. The river below moved slowly, carrying bits of leaves and sunlight in its current. You were leaning on the railing, your shirt catching the faint smell of rain still hanging in the air. Somewhere, a dog barked twice, and the sound of a distant boat engine hummed over the water. We didn't speak at first. You just handed me a small paper bag, inside a sweet bun still warm from the bakery. I remember breaking it in half, the steam rising into the cool evening. You took your share without a word, and somehow silence felt full instead of empty. There was a certain comfort in how we met, always in passing, never planned, yet each time felt like the world had made a small adjustment to bring us there. I recall the sound of bicycle wheels on gravel one early morning, when the mist still clung to the fields. You slowed beside me, your breath visible in the cold air, carrying that faint scent of wood smoke from someone's cooking fire. We spoke little, but your presence felt like a kind of shield from the day ahead. Looking back, I think I believed, in that quiet, unspoken way, that this was the beginning of something permanent. The season began to turn, and with it came the sound of dry leaves gathering in the corners of the street. One afternoon I found you at the old tea shop. The air inside was heavy with the scent of black tea and burnt sugar, and the faint clink of porcelain cups being set down on wooden tables. You were already seated, a notebook open in front of you, your pen tapping lightly, almost in rhythm with the rain outside. You asked me to sit. We spoke about nothing urgent, a neighbor's new puppy, the way the rain made the air smell like the first day of school. Even then I felt it, that invisible thread between us pulling tighter. I didn't know threads like that could break so easily. Not long after, my parents began to speak of marriage. Their voices carried a certainty that felt immovable. The conversations happened over dinner, steam rising from bowls of rice and vegetables, the smell of fish sauce drifting between us. I tried to eat slowly, but each word they spoke tasted like the end of something. They said there was someone, a man from a good family, with stability, with standing. They said he would take care of me, and that love would come later. I wanted to tell them about you, about the bridge, the sweet bun, the way your presence made the air feel safe, but I stayed silent, and silence has its own way of agreeing. The days after that felt different, as if a quiet clock had started ticking somewhere I couldn't see. I still saw you, sometimes in the market where the smell of ripe guava lingered in the warm air, sometimes at the riverside with the faint echo of children playing behind us. You didn't know about the conversations at home. I carried them like a stone in my pocket, heavy but hidden. One evening you mentioned a trip you might take. Nothing certain, just an idea. I remember the way your eyes searched mine, as if you were hoping to find a reason to stay. I wanted to give you that reason. I wanted to say your name out loud, to let it fill the space between us. But the words stayed behind my teeth. At home, the pressure grew. My mother spoke of duty. My father spoke of security. The kitchen smelled of simmering broth, and the steady chop of vegetables filled the pauses in their sentences. They painted a picture of the life I should have: a home with a tiled roof, a husband in a pressed shirt, me standing beside him at family gatherings. They never asked what I wanted, and I never told them. It felt easier to let the current carry me, even if it meant drifting away from the shore I longed for. Looking back, I wonder if they saw the hesitation in my eyes and chose to look away. Peg. The day they introduced us was bright, but the light felt sharp, as if it was meant to expose, not to warm. He was polite, his cologne faintly mixing with the smell of polished wood in the living room. We spoke in careful sentences, our voices low enough to be overheard without truly being ours. Outside, I could hear a bicycle bell passing by, and for a moment I thought of you. My parents watched from the doorway, their smiles small but certain. I think they believed they were giving me something safe. But safety is not the same as belonging, and even then I knew I would not belong here. The weeks that followed blurred together. Arrangements were made, dates chosen, fabric for the dress measured and cut. The house smelled of starch from newly ironed linens, the sound of sewing scissors snapping through satin. Relatives came by with advice, their voices carrying the hum of approval. I moved through it all like a shadow, present but untouchable. Every smile I gave felt borrowed, every nod rehearsed. At night, lying in my narrow bed, I would close my eyes and imagine the bridge, the river, the smell of bread still warm. I told myself it was only a memory, but it pulsed like something still alive. The morning of the wedding arrived quietly, as if the day itself knew not to celebrate too loudly. I woke before the house stirred, the air cool and still, the faint scent of jasmine from the garden slipping through the open window. Downstairs, the preparations had already begun. Voices rose and fell in the kitchen, pots clinking, water pouring into basins. The smell of steamed rice and fresh flowers mingled, weaving a haze that clung to my dress when I stepped into it. The fabric felt heavier than it should, like it had absorbed the weight of every unspoken thought I'd had for months. When they pinned my hair, I caught sight of myself in the mirror. The woman looking back seemed calm, almost serene, but her eyes were searching for something beyond the glass. For a moment, I imagined you walking in, your shirt sleeves rolled, the quiet curve of your smile pulling me out of this day. The vision vanished with the sound of my mother's voice, calling me downstairs. As the ceremony began, I stood beside him, the man chosen for me, while polite applause fluttered like weak wings around the room. The vows passed my lips, but my heart was somewhere far away, on a bridge, beside a river. Time began to move in quiet, measured steps. The seasons shifted, yet the rhythm of the house never changed. Morning tea steaming in porcelain cups, evening meals eaten with the faint clink of chopsticks against bowls. I learned to keep my thoughts folded away, like letters never sent. Some days the smell of rain on warm stone would pull me back to afternoons with you, those moments by the river, the warmth of a sweet bun in my hands. I would pause in the middle of washing dishes, hands wet, and feel as though I could almost hear your voice behind me. But when I turned, it was always the same still room, the same soft ticking of the clock on the wall. I grew used to the sound, as one grows used to carrying an old wound. And yet, there were nights I lay awake, tracing the shape of your name in my mind, not daring to speak it aloud, but holding it close, as if it might keep me from disappearing entirely. Years passed. The streets outside changed, shops closing and reopening under new names, the smell of fresh paint replacing the old scent of sun-baked wood. Inside, my life felt untouched by time. The marriage became a silent partnership, duties met, conversations limited to what was necessary. Even laughter felt like something borrowed, worn only for the benefit of visitors. One afternoon, sorting through an old drawer, I found the blue scarf, the one you once returned to me. It no longer smelled of jasmine, but when I held it to my cheek, I felt the ghost of that moment, your hand, the warmth of your eyes, the street alive with market sounds. I folded it back into the drawer, closing it gently, as though the scarf might bruise. Some things are too fragile to keep in the light for long. The years blurred and the small rooms of the house filled with the voices of children. Their laughter bounced off the walls, mixing with the smell of warm milk and the faint sweetness of soap after baths. In those years I kept busy, measuring school uniforms, tying shoelaces, packing lunches before the first light broke through the curtains. The sound of their feet on the stairs in the morning was the only music I needed. But children grow. One by one, they stepped out into their own lives, their rooms growing quiet, their beds neatly made and left untouched for weeks. The house, once alive with noise, now hummed softly, like a seashell held to the ear, full of echoes but empty of the sea. I began to notice the silence again, the same silence I had known before they were born, only now it felt heavier, as if it had been waiting for me to return. With the children gone, my days fell into an unbroken pattern: morning tea, watering the plants, folding laundry that would never be worn by anyone else. Sometimes I'd stand at the kitchen window, watching the street below. The air would carry the scent of bread from the bakery down the corner, and without warning, I would think of you, waiting beside your bicycle all those years ago. I would picture the crease of your smile, the way your hand rested on the handlebars, the sound of your voice calling my name softly. It was a memory that could warm and wound in the same breath, and I would wonder if somewhere in another country you ever thought of me too. One rainy evening, I found myself walking without purpose, my umbrella tilting against the wind. The streets shimmered under the lamplight, puddles holding small galaxies of reflected gold. I passed the bridge. The railing was wet and cold under my palm. The river moved steadily beneath, its smell of damp earth and drifting leaves so achingly familiar it made my chest tighten. For a moment I could almost see you there again, hands in your pockets, half smile untouched by time. I stood there longer than I meant to, letting the rain soak my sleeves, feeling the years collapse into that single space. No one passed by. It was as if the town had stepped aside to let me be alone with what I'd lost. When I finally turned away, my reflection in the shop windows looked older, but my heart still felt 22, and just as unsure. Not long after, I began writing small notes to myself. Nothing elaborate, just fragments of memories, pressed like flowers between the pages of a notebook. One page held the scent of jasmine, another the shape of your name written in my smallest handwriting. I even sketched the curve of the bridge, the lines uneven but true. The smell of ink filled the room, reminding me of the first time I saw you, pen in hand, head bent over a notebook. These notes weren't meant to be sent anywhere. They were for me, to keep the thread from snapping entirely. Each line I wrote felt like a quiet rebellion against the life I had been told to choose. It was in those silent hours at the desk that the idea of this letter began to grow. A letter I would never give to you, but one that might finally set something free. I chose a night when the world felt slower. The air outside was heavy with the scent of rain-soaked soil, and the only sound was the steady tap of water from the eaves. I sat at the table with a blank sheet before me, the lamp casting a soft gold circle over the paper. My hand hesitated, the pen tip hovering, as if the first word might break something fragile inside me. I could hear the faint ticking of the clock in the hallway, each second urging me forward. Finally, I wrote your name. Just that, and the air in the room shifted. It felt as though you had stepped closer, standing just over my shoulder, quiet, patient, waiting to hear what I had kept inside for so long. I began to write about the bridge, the sweet bun, the scent of jasmine, and the way your voice once made the edges of the day feel softer. The words came slowly, but each one felt like it belonged. The letter grew, page after page, ink flowing like a slow river that had been dammed for years. I wrote about the days we met, the mornings you appeared beside me without warning, the comfort of your silence. I told you of the scarf, how I had kept it hidden all these years, and how it still carried the echo of that first touch. I didn't hide the truth. I wrote about the marriage I entered, the smiles I wore like borrowed clothing, the quiet way you disappeared from my world. And I wrote of the way I still carried you, even in rooms where your name was never spoken. By the time I set the pen down, the lamp's light had softened, and the night beyond the window felt deep enough to hold every word. I folded the pages carefully, though I knew they would never leave this house. I wrote to you as if you might read it one day, not because I believed you would, but because I needed the words to feel real. I told you I had loved you quietly, like a candle kept in the corner of a room, its flame small but steady. I told you how the sound of your bicycle bell could still find me in the middle of a crowded street, years after you were gone. I admitted the truth I had swallowed for decades, that I had chosen the life my parents wanted, and in doing so, I had turned away from the one my heart knew. I wrote about fear, how it can dress itself as duty, how it can sound like wisdom when spoken by those we love. And I thanked you for the bridge, the sweet bun, the scarf, and for never asking me to be braver than I was. Because now, I wish you had. As the letter deepened, I found myself writing to the girl I used to be. I told her to speak sooner, to reach out when her heart leaned forward, to hold on to the hand that made the world feel steady. I told her that courage isn't loud. Sometimes, it's just the choice to stay when it's easier to walk away. The smell of rain through the window made the room feel smaller, as if it were folding around the words. I imagined placing the letter in her hands, watching her read it, seeing her eyes widen as if she'd been given a map to another life. But that girl is long gone, and I am here, writing to ghosts, because sometimes that's the only way to keep them close. I wondered as I wrote where you might be now. If you'd built a life that fit you, or if you too had learned to live around a missing piece. Maybe you found someone whose laughter felt like home. Maybe you walk across a different bridge, the air smelling of spices or sea salt instead of jasmine. Maybe you never think of me at all, and perhaps that is how it should be. Still, I imagine you reading these words, somewhere quiet, the paper warm from your hands. You'd pause in the same places I did, feel the same pull between what was and what might have been. And if only for a moment we'd stand on the same side of time again, looking out at the same horizon before it vanished once more. In the quiet that followed, I sat with my hands folded on the table, listening to the small sounds of the house, the hum of the refrigerator, the faint creak of the wooden floor as it settled. The letter was only a few feet away, yet it felt like a bridge I had finally built between then and now, not one I could cross, but one I could see clearly for the first time in decades. I thought about how love leaves traces, not always in grand gestures, but in the way a certain scent or sound can stop you mid-step. For me, it was the smell of fresh bread, the ring of a bicycle bell, and the weight of a scarf in my hands. These are the pieces of you I carry, not the whole of you, but enough to remind me of the life I once almost had. If I could send you one message, it would be this. I hope you found a place where you are truly known. I hope there is someone who sees you the way I once did, someone who listens to the quiet spaces between your words. I hope you walk across bridges without looking back, and that the air around you always feels safe. As for me, I've learned that some choices can't be undone, but they can be understood, and sometimes that understanding is the only form of peace we're allowed. So I will keep the letter, not as a wound, but as proof that once I was brave enough to tell the truth, even if it came too late. And that was her letter. Every word carried quietly for decades, finally given a place to rest tonight. I don't know where he is now, the man she once loved, and maybe she doesn't either, but what I do know is that sometimes the act of speaking our truth, even if it arrives years too late, is a kind of freedom. Thank you for sitting here with me, for walking with her through those bridges, those kitchens, those rainy evenings. You've given her words a home beyond the page, and that matters more than you might think. If you carry your own untold story, I hope one day you'll let it breathe, maybe not to the person it's about, but to yourself, because you deserve to hear your own truth out loud. I'm grateful we could share this quiet together, and I hope wherever you are, you feel a little less alone tonight. Until we meet here again, take